Origin just homesick reaction. This is how US became a superpower. Bacha military show. Having better geographical location, not being part of Europe, I guess. Or, not having like World War at your doorstep. That might be the reason. Yeah, I've been watching this kind of like a military geopolitics type of video recently, and yeah, this popped up in my recommendation. Like, why the hell not? I don't think I've watched similar video like this, like point blank talking about like US and how it became a power in the 20th century, basically, because even before World War One, it wasn't what it is today, but it was still like economical power, right? But in 20th century, it became like really big, and at this point, like it's like nearly untouchable now. So it's going to be interesting. Let's watch this one. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe. So, that way you can help this channel by helping the algorithm things. And I know which type of videos to react to more. If you haven't seen other reactions like this update, there's a link in the description there. You'll find it. Or in the end of the video end card. Let's watch it.
Today, the United States is the largest superpower in the world. But has that always been the case? The answer to that question is a resounding no. In fact, up until the Second World War, the United States had no interest in becoming a major power. If that's true, how did America become a superpower? And why?
I don't know, man. Before World War II, it didn't have any interest military-wise to not become a power, right? It was already economical power, right? A lot of people needed US in economy. Now they really needed. Back then, it's like a lot of business were happening.
Why did it happen after World War II? We hear the word superpower all of the time, but what does that really mean? You'd be surprised to learn that there's no real definition of what makes a country a superpower, at least one that everyone can agree on. Also, there are no specific numbers a country needs to achieve to be considered.
But I can say, I can narrow it down somewhat. Maybe superpower, means like, first of all, it's like self, independent in a way that doesn't rely on other countries, right? Top of that, it has like strong enough military that it can, have presence at the world stage, and its economy is really strong. These three combined, I'm guessing it makes it a superpower.
A superpower, be it the size of the army, the country's GDP, or the number of allies it has. So if there's no definition of superpower or specific numbers that a country needs to achieve, then how do you know if you are a superpower? It mostly comes down to what other countries think. If they believe you are a superpower, then you probably are a superpower. But that is not enough to define superpower. We must look deeper into what makes a superpower. Perhaps there are certain traits that all superpowers share. In fact, there are.
Again, don't want to pause too much, but even before this war, I don't know what is the case right now, but before this Ukraine war, everybody thought of Russia as a superpower. Now its economy is not that strong, right? But why they thought of it, why economy, like it still stands, economy thing still stands, but Russia was different, right? Even during the Soviet time, they were like, Iron Curtain. So they were like, they weren't doing any business with anybody, and they were just like surviving. Right now, it's kind of similar to that. Even if the GDP is bad, they are surviving on their own, right? They can do things on their own, right? They have their own oil, gas, and things like that. So even their economy might not be the top one. They're self-sufficient in that way. Their military was powerful, their nuclear arsenal. So Russia was a superpower. I don't know what is the state now, but yeah, there you go.
Military might. Superpowers need to have a large and powerful military. They must be able to project force almost everywhere in the world, on the ground, in the air, and at sea. Their weapons are technologically superior to other countries and almost always have military bases spread across the globe. Economic strength. A superpower must have a strong economy. This can be best measured through its gross domestic product. What is GDP? It's a way to measure the total value of all goods and services produced within a country. A high GDP typically indicates a strong economy. There are other factors as well: a moderate inflation rate, low unemployment, an extensive infrastructure, a reasonable amount of foreign debt. International influence. A superpower can convince other countries to support its interests, policies, and actions. Often this takes the form of countries sharing mutual interests and building strong alliances. In extreme situations, a superpower has the willingness to impose economic sanctions and sometimes will threaten military action to get its way. Although these three factors, military might, a strong economy, and being able to influence...
Yeah, I forgot that one. Monopoly is like really strong one, right? Of all the like economy, military power, you also have to have monopoly. because it's not just to flex in front of the world. You also, like, in the background, political wise, you have to have power that you can impose without even doing anything. Monopoly, basically.
Influence other countries are the hallmarks of a superpower. There are other factors as well. Superpowers are politically stable. It doesn't matter if they are democratic or authoritarian, just that the government is stable. Superpowers tend to have large populations and plentiful resources.
I mean,
they possess advanced technology, and their people have a strong sense of nationalism. They have a unified culture, and there is little or no sectionalism. So now we know the traits of a superpower. Let's look at some of the countries that may have been considered superpowers in the modern era. Britain may have been considered a superpower at one time. At the dawn of the 20th century, Britain possessed almost all of the traits of a superpower. It had a large military and the most powerful navy in the world, and with that navy it could project power almost anywhere. It had a vast network of colonies, so vast that it was once said that the sun never set on the British Empire. It was highly influential in world affairs and had a strong economy based on manufacturing and trade. Although Britain itself did not possess vast resources, it was able to rely on its colonies to produce everything it needed. Its internal population was not particularly large, but when combined with its colonies,
what is the fact? Strategically relocated, whatever.
Significant population as well. It had all the earmarks of a superpower. But what about the United States? What's the background story here? The answer may surprise you. Throughout most of its history, the United States was considered a minor, relatively insignificant country. It was far from Europe, had a very small army, and had little interest in becoming a major power. Aside from the Western Hemisphere, the United States largely ignored the rest of the world. That began to change in 1898 as a result of the Spanish-American War. Almost everyone expected Spain would win, and win easily. After all, it was militarily much larger. Yet the Americans swiftly defeated the Spanish at sea and on land. Not only did the United States soundly defeat a major European power, it had done so in a mere 6 weeks. What was even more impressive was that the United States had been able to capture Spanish territory far from its shores. By the end of the war, America controlled several territories in the Caribbean. It had also wrestled control of the Philippines Islands.
I think it's the mentality, how the US was formed in the first place, all the founding father, what was the atmosphere in US, what were their core values, right? This all translates into like having like going over the top with what they're trying to do, right? Like attack, defend, they will always go a bit higher than anybody else would do, just because how they were founded, right? What is their history? So that all ties together into like, severely fighting for whatever they want, whatever they're trying to fight for.
Islands far from America's shores. With the Philippines, America now had a foothold in Asia, a base from which it could trade throughout the region. It also annexed the Hawaiian Islands, allowing it to control part of the Central Pacific Ocean. To everyone's surprise, the United States had built a small empire for itself. Europe began to realize that the United States had the potential to become a world power. Its vast resources and manufacturing capabilities had long been known, but in its war with Spain, the United States had shown an unexpected military capability. Not only could it raise an army very quickly, from less than 30,000 soldiers to 220,000 in a matter of months, it could fight far beyond its territorial waters. It was the perfect opportunity for the United States to establish itself as a rising power. Yet, within a few years, the United States lost interest in the rest of the world and retreated into isolationism. It slashed the size of its military and refused to involve itself in European politics. It remained that way until 1917, when it entered the First World War.
I think people are forgetting where US came from, where the people in US came from. They are the Europeans. They are Britain 2.0, I guess, right? All the, at least, Caucasians can basically, find their, what is it called, like that DNA test, whatever they're doing in there, right? Like to find their ancestry. They can probably trace back to like England or something, like Britain, right? The whole reason they get out of Europe, so they can like run away from all this shit, all the religious persecution, all the Europe shit they can run away from. So of course they're gonna do that. They're like, okay, I didn't come here to do all this shit with you. Of course they went to isolism.
World War. Much like the Spanish-American War, the United States entered the First World War with a small military. In fact, the army was smaller than 13 of the states that were already active in the war. It had a standing army of less than 130,000 soldiers in 1917. A year later, it had 4 million men under arms, half of them serving in Europe. And again, the United States showed that it could project force far from home.
Yeah, but they probably had a smaller number of military because they enter very late. You need time to be war ready.
Peak, some 10,000 soldiers arrived in France each day. For a time, however, it appeared that America wanted to become part of a wider world. It even proposed the creation of an international body to resolve disputes through dialogue, diplomacy, and mediation. It was the first institution of its kind in the modern era. Instead of returning to isolation, the United States sought to bring the nations of the world together and participate in the global community beyond trade and military actions. It was called the League of Nations. More than 40 nations signed on to the League of Nations immediately. These included major powers such as the United Kingdom and France. Lesser powers such as Japan and the newly formed Soviet Union were also founding members. They were joined by many other countries around the world, including Brazil, China, South Africa, and others. At its peak, the League of Nations had more than 60 members, with representatives from every region of the world. Yet, the country that proposed the idea of the League of Nations, the United States, did not join. There was simply not enough political support to become a member of the international community. American politicians sought to retreat from world affairs and return to a policy.
I said you should create a League of Nations to dispute your shit. I didn't say I have anything to do with it. We are all the way there, man, in Americas. Different continent. I don't care about you, right? You can do your shit form League of Nations so you can be peaceful. Don't come to me.
Of isolationism, and so they did. When the Second World War broke out in 1939, the United States sought to avoid becoming a direct participant in the conflict. It was willing to go to great lengths to ensure that the Allies were provided with weapons and resources, but nothing more. That changed on December 7, 1941, when Japan launched a massive surprise attack on America's largest military base in the Pacific, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Japan had been a country on the rise for several decades and had great ambitions to become a powerful nation that wielded great power and influence. Japan believed that the time had come to drive Western influence out of East Asia and liberate its Asian brothers from European and American exploitation. And once liberated, it was Japan's responsibility to protect them. It sounded like a noble cause, but it sought to free Asia through exploitation. They understood that to build an empire, Japan needed to build a strong economy and a
all the shit Japan did in China is insane. Imagine that.
Powerful military, but lacked the natural resources needed to expel the West. It believed that the only way that it could achieve its goals was to seize those resources by force. It soon found itself at odds with the United States, which objected to Japanese expansionism. Japan was not overly concerned with the United States. It saw them as a weak enemy whose people lacked the political will to fight a war. It believed that a single strike on the American Navy would end the war with a single blow.
Look, man, I don't think United States was weak during World War II. All the ships and flagships and they had powerful enough navy, right? Even though they didn't want to get involved in world affairs, they didn't just sit back. They saw World War I and just during those times that really amped up things. So seeing them as weak enemies was kind of weird.
Not everyone agreed that the United States was a weak country or that its people would avoid war at all costs. One of Japan's greatest military leaders, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, knew the potential of the United States. He had spent a considerable amount of time in America. He understood the vastness of America's resources, its industrial capabilities, and a strong sense of determination among its people. Yamamoto saw the United States as a sleeping giant that once awakened would prove to be a dangerous enemy. And he was right. The United States did not back down after the destruction of its fleet at Pearl Harbor. Japan had woken the giant.
Yeah, US had Iowa-class ships and all these massive, powerful ships that just kicked ass during World War II. Come on.
And that spelt doom for Japan and its German ally. The United States had long been an industrial powerhouse. Although many American factories closed through the Great Depression, they were quickly reopened and retooled to produce war materials. New factories were built, increasing the amount of goods the United States could produce. With its vast natural resources, the United States had the necessary materials to supply its factories. It mobilized its population.
Vast material? I don't know which videos I watched. US has a shit ton of gas, petrol, and things like that. It's anything you want, US has a lot of it. US even has a lot of land mass. US is one of the biggest countries of the world. US has a lot of things, right? A lot of gas and God knows what. US has one of the best geographical location. The US checks a lot of boxes even from the start. So, I don't know how somebody can see US as weak during the World War II time. It's just weird.
Which had grown to 150 million people. to work in its factories and serve in the military. In 1941, the US military had 1.4 million men under arms. By 1945, the size of the American military had grown to 12 million. The army itself had increased from 1.4 million soldiers to well over 8 million in just 4 years. It also developed a secret weapon, one that would change the course of world history: the atomic bomb. Yes, the sleeping giant was fully awake and would never sleep again.
Yeah, Japan really didn't understand the US's ideology in the first place. Their focus on freedom, how much their people were patriot based on that, like how much they valued freedom. So way too many people enlisted, and capitalistic approach of US, right? How they were like open to everybody, let a lot of like scientists in during the world, especially during the World War II time, where everybody just escaped Europe. There you go, Manhattan Project, and the end of everything.
The United States emerged from the Second World War as the most powerful nation in the world, a title that it still holds today. As a result of the Second World War, the United States went from being a B-list actor on the world stage to the biggest superstar ever known. How exactly did this happen, and why was the Second World War the catalyst for superstardom? Let's explore. The war had devastated Europe. Hardly a major city survived unscathed. Cities such as London and Berlin were barely left standing as a result of almost continuous bombing raids. During the war, the German bombers destroyed an estimated 70,000 buildings in London. Another 1.7 million buildings were damaged. In Berlin, an estimated 80% of the city center was destroyed between Allied bombing and the Soviet Union's assault and eventual capture of the city. Dresden saw 90% of its city center destroyed in a single night.
Everything.
But that was not the worst. The German city of Jülich was completely leveled. 100% of its buildings were destroyed between bombing raids and fighting for control of the city during the war. Japan too faced widespread devastation. For much of the war, the Japanese home island.
Okay, before the bombs fell, like US was sending ridiculous amount of bombers, and Japan was being unfazed, like, oh, let them come in, right? That's why everybody just argued like nuke was necessary. Japan was not giving up regardless of what. The level of bombing that were happening in Japan was like insane.
Islands were safely out of reach of American bombers. That changed in June 1944, when the United States introduced the B-29 Superfortress, a new bomber that could reach Japan from great distances. The United States repeatedly attacked Japanese cities with firebombs, setting whole cities afire. On the night of March 9, 1945, the United States sent hundreds of bombers to attack the Japanese capital of Tokyo with incendiary bombs. Approximately 270,000 buildings, 25% of the city, were destroyed in this single attack. The fires killed an estimated 100,000 Japanese, with another million.
Yeah, after seeing all those factories and videos like Eager Beavers and things like that, like the people, they were in the US military. Oh, the insanity, everything, right? It is like all of them can have their own movies at this point, right? Hollywood level shit, right? You can't just make a movie if it's not like insanely over the top. They were all over the top. You can make a movie about all of them.
Left homeless. The war ended when the United States attacked the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki with a new secret weapon, the atomic bomb. The attack on Hiroshima either damaged or destroyed nearly 70% of the city's infrastructure. In Nagasaki, nearly 40% of the buildings were destroyed or damaged. When the war finally ended, the United States found that it was stronger than it was when it entered the war. And there are reasons for that. America was protected by thousands of miles of ocean on each side, and simply could not be attacked in any meaningful way. Its cities, factories, and infrastructure remained untouched. Not only that, but America's industrial production doubled during the war. Its GDP grew by $47 billion.
Basically, imagine there's a body that existed for an insane amount of long time, like centuries and centuries. They always grew, they always kill each other and just rinse and repeat. Some people just ran away and made a camp somewhere else in the distance. This shit still kept going on while they start to become more stronger, and there you go, United States. That's how you can summarize how people left Europe, went to USA, and Europe still being Europe. There you go.
And the unemployment rate dropped to 1.2%. America still emerged from the war as a wealthy country with tremendous industrial capabilities. It was also more technically advanced than any other country and had the strongest military in the world. It was the only country to possess the most devastating weapon known to mankind, the atomic bomb. By the end of the Second World War, the United States had all the hallmarks of a superpower, except for one: a willingness to participate in global affairs. In the past, American politics...
That does... Well, come on. I mean, just because you don't get involved doesn't mean you're not a superpower. By this point, like, this is a superpower. This is a superpower it can get. By flexing at world stage at this level, having only nuclear weapons, GDP at another level, military powerful now.
Politicians had no interest, no ambitions to become a leading nation. It had shown this mentality after the First World War, when it chose to turn its back on the League of Nations and withdrew.
This is awesome. Look at the globe view, right? Most people don't see globe view, they just see 2D map. But look at the Alaska. You see Alaska side, but it's like going up. And that's where Russia is. And look at how big Pacific always gets crunched down, because like open water's barely anything there. So it's like one of the easiest thing you can remove from a map. So it's like barely, but look at it here. See how big it is, and that's just Hawaii or whatever in the center. There's an angle where you can't even see any land, only Hawaii, just Pacific Ocean. Just some islands that you can't even see because they're way too small.
From European affairs, but this time would be different. The United States would embrace the rest of the world. It did so in many different ways. The United States committed itself to rebuilding Europe, specifically Western Europe. Through the Marshall Plan, the United States provided Western Europe with significant financial support and made available the necessary materials for countries to rebuild their cities, infrastructure, and manufacturing capabilities. It also helped rebuild Japan and created new political institutions that favored the United States. It later began to provide foreign aid to other countries around the world to curry favor among less developed countries. The United States also helped to establish and actively participate in new international institutions such as the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank, all of whom had headquarters in the United States. It filled political and economic voids in many parts of the world as a result of the demise of the British, French, and Japanese empires. It formed military alliances such as NATO and positioned itself to become the protector of the free world. The United States was not the only country that became a superpower from the ashes of the Second World War. It was joined by the Soviet Union, which would eventually become America's biggest enemy. The Soviet Union had suffered greatly during the Second World War, especially in the early years of the conflict, but gained strength as the war progressed. By 1945, it was determined to control all of the territory it had captured from Germany. It had twice been devastated by Germany and was forced to exit the First World War before the conflict ended. After the Second World War, Russia was determined to create a buffer zone between itself and potential future adversaries. The countries of Eastern Europe would serve as that buffer
Why is this not in red? Wasn't this also part of Soviet Union?
Zone. To ensure their loyalty, the Soviets installed communist puppet states. Europe became divided into two camps, countries that favored the United States and countries that favored the Soviet Union. This ultimately led to a Cold War in which most of the world would become polarized between the two countries. This changed in the early 1990s, when the Soviet Union collapsed. The reborn Russian Federation was still a superpower, but much weaker than it had been. It soon regained its strength, and Russia began to challenge the United States as a new Cold War started to emerge. Russia proved to be a paper tiger, however. When it invaded Ukraine in February 2022, the global community believed the conflict would last only a few weeks. Nobody ever expected Ukraine to fight back in any meaningful war, but it did. After Ukraine beat back the initial Russian advance, the Western powers began to slowly arm Ukraine with modern weaponry. Western arms changed the tide of the war. Russian equipment proved to be significantly inferior to American, British, and French weaponry, and today, the Russian army is on the defensive. Russia's status as a superpower has been questioned as a result of its failure on the battlefield, and the fact that world opinion has turned against it. Russia has very little influence.
I mean, I would argue like Russia might not be as a superpower as US, but it still is for a few factors. They still have nuclear power, so it can basically, when shit comes to, it can basically destroy a lot of things. It has like self-sufficient economy somewhat, right? Because it has its own gas fields and things like that. It can basically like Iron Curtain type, it can still like, for a certain amount of time at least, right? It doesn't point blank rely on other countries that way. And its military is powerful enough. It's not as powerful as the West, obviously, as we've seen. It would have crushed Ukraine if like West didn't help, right? But West did help, and West does have like mostly United States does have like a powerful weapon compared to it. So compared to United States, it might not be as strong, but any other country around the world, it's still strong enough. So in that way, maybe I'm saying maybe because I don't know what's happening past year. what is the state of Russia and its equipment now at this, like, because this is like ongoing conflict. But yeah.
Influence in world affairs and its economy is in tatters. It no longer meets the key qualifications of a superpower. If Russia is no longer a superpower, could the United States eventually lose its superpower status too? It's possible, but not anytime soon. America still possesses all of the traits of a superpower, but some areas are starting to weaken. The United States has amassed a staggering amount of debt in recent decades, and it faces a serious trade deficit that increases every year.
Yeah, but economy doesn't, first of all, like a lot of money, if not all money, is like tied to a dollar. So if dollar inflates, all other currency inflates as well. Like, it's like, that's normal. And, that's not how debt works completely, So I don't know if that works towards not being a superpower or something. Yeah.
Just last year alone, the trade deficit increased by more than 10%, and there are no signs that the situation will improve.
That's mostly because of China and how much it's doing.
Political divisions are widening, and the ability to compromise is becoming more difficult. Even election results have been called into question. But not all is lost. America remains the most powerful nation in the world. It has a modern and powerful military that is second to none. Its economy remains the largest in the world, and there is no evidence that its influence on world affairs is in decline. Problems can be fixed, and the United States will remain a superpower for the foreseeable future. But will it be the only superpower? China may be on the verge of becoming a superpower.
Yeah.
It possesses many of the qualities of a superpower. It has the second largest economy in the world.
I think it crossed the superpower mark a few years ago, in 2016, 2017 pass, when it started to do things, a lot of like projecting strength at a certain level, military and navy like started to become like really strong. Might not be at the level of US, but it's like behind, but it still have a lot of numbers of things.
It has the largest army in the world, and it's rapidly modernizing its military. China has the third largest nuclear stockpile and is actively expanding its arsenal. China has a strong and unified government, and its influence outside of Asia is growing. It has the largest population in the world and possesses advanced
it has a communistic government, and if history anything goes by to, like, it can develop cracks pretty fast, so I don't know about that. But yeah.
Technology. Yet China is facing some headwinds in its attempt to become a superpower. Its economy may not be as strong as it appears, and its navy still needs to build more ships that can operate far from its shores. Yes, China has the potential to become a superpower, but that might not be as soon as people think. What do you think? Will China become a superpower?
It already
Can it challenge
is.
the United States on the world stage? Let us know what you think in the comments.
I think China is already superpower. Are you thinking of the top superpower? That argument is different. It is a superpower based on how much military, navy it has, how much things it can do, how much economy it has, how much others rely on it as well, right? A lot of world relies on China's economy and China's things. A lot of super rare things China has, like everybody else wants. Yeah, China can, dictate things. So some places it also has monopoly. So it's, that way it's already a superpower. But is it at the level of US? No, I don't think it is. Well, that was how US become a superpower. Channel The Military Show. If you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to see other reactions like this, check out the link in the description or end card right now. I have Instagram now. If you want to follow me, the only social media I use for social reasons. Also Twitter, where I post links when I post new videos. Sometimes YouTube doesn't send notification. Also link in the description. And I'll see you next time.